On a black December night in 1900, a passing steamer looked toward a small island off the western edge of Scotland and saw nothing. Where a brand new lighthouse should have been throwing its beam across the Atlantic, warning ships away from the rocks, there was only darkness. On that island, 3 experienced men had been given one duty above all others: to keep the light burning. It had gone out. And when rescuers finally reached the rock 11 days later, the 3 keepers were gone, vanished so completely that, more than a century on, we still do not know for certain what took them. This is the story of the Flannan Isles, the lighthouse mystery that has never been solved. The Flannan Isles are a scatter of rock in the North Atlantic, some 20 miles west of the Isle of Lewis, at the very edge of the Outer Hebrides. Sailors once called them the 7 Hunters. No one lived there. The largest of them, Island Moor, the Big Island, rises in sheer cliffs straight out of a violent sea, its summit a bare green crown marked by the ruins of an ancient stone chapel. For centuries, Hebridean fishermen had treated the islands as uneasy ground, a place where a man removed his cap and turned sunwise before setting foot ashore. In 1899, into that lonely place, engineers built a lighthouse and sent men to live in it. There were 3 of them on the rock that December. James Ducat, 43, the principal keeper, a calm and experienced man. Thomas Marshall, 28, the second assistant. And Donald MacArthur, an occasional keeper standing in for a colleague who had fallen ill, a local man said to be strong and quick-tempered. Their work was relentless and simple: tend the great lamp, trim the wicks, and keep the light alive through every storm the Atlantic could throw at them. And that winter, the Atlantic threw everything. On the night of the 15th of December 1900, a steamer called the Arctur passed the Flannans in poor weather and noticed something wrong. The lighthouse was dark. It should have been impossible. The sighting was reported when the ship reached port, but the relief vessel that served the island had already been held back for days by ferocious seas. It was not until the 26th of December, 11 days later, the day after Christmas, that the lighthouse tender Hesperus finally fought her way out to Island Moor. Something was wrong before they even touched the rock. No flag flew from the mast. No empty supply boxes had been left out on the landing for collection. And no keeper came down to meet them, though the ship sounded her whistle and fired a flare into the gray sky. A relief keeper named Joseph Moore climbed the steep steps to the lighthouse alone. He found the entrance gate shut and the doors closed. Inside, the rooms were empty. The clock on the wall had stopped. The beds were cold. In the kitchen, everything sat in its place. But of the 3 men, there was no sign at all. Moore noticed one detail that chilled him. By the entrance, the keepers' waterproof coats, their oilskins, hung on their hooks. 2 sets were gone, but 1 set remained. Whatever had called the 3rd man outside, he had gone out into a winter gale, onto a storm-battered rock, without stopping to put on his coat. The answer, or the closest thing to one, was waiting at the western landing. There, on the side of the island that faced the open ocean, the storm had done something almost beyond belief. A wooden box, fixed inside a crevice in the cliff nearly 110 feet above the level of the sea, had been torn open and emptied, its contents flung across the rock. Iron railings were buckled and bent flat. A block of stone weighing more than a ton had been wrenched loose and shifted from its place. Turf had been ripped away from the cliff edge at a height no ordinary wave should ever reach. Something enormous had risen out of the sea and struck the island, far higher than water was ever supposed to climb. When the board's superintendent, Robert Muirhead, arrived to investigate, he pieced the evidence together. He had known all three men personally. He concluded that Ducat and Marshall had gone down to the West Landing during the storm to secure the equipment there before it was washed away, a normal, necessary task. And he believed that while they worked, exposed on the rock, a single monstrous wave had surged up out of the Atlantic, swept up the cliff face, and carried them into the sea. The third man, MacArthur, the one who had left his oilskins on their hook, may have seen it coming from the tower and run down without his coat to shout a warning, only to be taken as well. In a matter of seconds, all three were gone, and the light went dark. And here the true story collides with a far stranger one. Because in the years that followed, the Flannan Isles mystery grew into a legend, and much of what people now remember about it was simply invented. In 1912, a poet named Wilfred Wilson Gibson published a haunting poem called Flannan Isle, and it added details that have clung to the story ever since. A meal left half-eaten on the table, a chair overturned as though a man had leapt up in terror. Later, retellings went further still, claiming the keeper's logbook described days of a terrible storm that no weather station had ever recorded, of one hardened keeper weeping, another praying, all three struck silent with dread. It made for a chilling tale, but none of it was true. Investigators confirmed that no such entries ever existed. The real log was routine, right up until it simply stopped. The uneaten meal, the toppled chair, the weeping men, all of it was fiction, layered onto the silence because the truth left too much room to fill. Stripped of the ghost story, what remains is somehow more unsettling. There was no sign of a struggle, no note, and no bodies. The sea gave nothing back. And so the theories multiplied to fill the void. That one keeper had murdered the others and thrown himself into the waves, that a sea serpent or a ghost ship or foreign agents had taken them, that they had been spirited off the rock entirely. None of it was ever needed. The island itself, and that shattered box 100 feet above the tide line, told the likeliest story. For a long time, that story had one weakness. Waves of such size, walls of water rising out of an ordinary sea, were dismissed by science as the exaggerations of frightened sailors. But in the decades since, we have learned that rogue waves are terrifyingly real. Sudden, towering swells that appear out of nowhere and vanish just as fast, tall enough to overwhelm a ship or scour a cliff. The thing that most likely took the keepers of the Flannan Isles was not a monster and not a curse. It was the sea doing something the men on that rock could not have predicted and could not have survived. The lighthouse still stands on Island Moor today, automated now, its light running without a single human hand. Ships still pass it in the dark. And three keepers, Ducat, Marshall, and MacArthur, are still out there somewhere beneath the gray Atlantic. The men who kept the light, until the night the sea reached up and put it out.